Today, I would like to talk about Citta Nupassana, mindfulness on the consciousness, contemplation of the consciousness, contemplation of the body, Kaya Nupassana, contemplation of feelings, Vedana Nupassana. The third one is contemplation of mindfulness. It is said in the Satipatthana Sutta, Punaja Param Bhikkhave Bhikkhu Sarakamwa Citta Sarakamwa Cittanti Pajanati Vida Rakamwa Citta Vida Rakamwa Cittanti Pajanati Sadho Samwa Citta Sadho Samwa Cittanti Pajanati Vida Dho Samwa Citta Vida Dho Samwa Cittanti Pajanati Samohanwa Citta Samohanwa Cittanti Pajanati. Again, bhikkhus. The bhikkhu knows consciousness with the lust as the consciousness with the lust. He knows the consciousness without lust as the consciousness without lust. Then hate and delusion, anger and delusion. According to this instruction, we practice Vipassana meditation. In our mind, when we practice Vipassana meditation, before we practice Vipassana meditation, our yogis take 8 precepts. When we take 8 precepts, we restrain our speech, we restrain our body, the body action. So, quite clear, but not the mind. It is better to take precepts when we practice meditation. We restrain our mind with mindfulness, trying to know the rising falling closely as a main object. At the beginning of the practice, even though we try to know the rising falling closely, we cannot note it all the time because our mindfulness is not strong enough, as you know. Our mental energy is not strong enough. So you may notice the mind, our mind, always goes off, thinking, wondering, imagining, planning, sometimes remembering, sometimes criticizing. We must note all of them. Sometimes, unexpectedly, such a thought, the thought of lust, would arise. We do not pay attention to it. We pay attention to the rising and falling of the abdomen. We try to develop mindfulness. Then we try to develop concentration so that we can understand clearly as they really are. As we are unenlightened ones, Puthojana, our minds are so crazy about senses. If we are young, our minds are more sensitive. So, even though we try to keep our mind on the abdomen, note it very closely, our mind goes off rapidly. So we must note, as we are instructed, when we think, note thinking. When our mind wanders, note wandering, imagining, remembering, and so on. If we are unable to note the thoughts comes continuously. If your noting mind is not energetic, the thoughts even stronger. So just now I recited Satipatthana Sutta, Citta Nupassana, Sarakamwa Citta, Sarakamwa Cittanti Pajanati. When there is a sensual pleasure thought or the thought of lust must be noted. The instruction is very simple, very easy. The bhikkhu knows. The bhikkhu means the practitioner, not only the monks. In this case, the practitioners also called bhikkhu. They wanted to liberate it from the samsara, so they are called bhikkhu. So they know there is sensual pleasure or the thought of lust in me. That is, you have to note the lust or longing or craving, must note. When you note it straight away. You should not delay noting. If you delay noting it, your mind would follow it closely. Then you could not have the ability to control the feeling. That's why we must note it rapidly, immediately, and closely. But at the moment, as you know, you are practicing, that noting is not powerful enough yet. Mostly at the beginning of the practice, if we are beginner yogi, we follow the thoughts. The mind doesn't come back to the rising and falling. Thinking take quite a long time. But we must try, as the Buddha said, put forth effort. The more you pay close attention to your main object, the more you would understand your state of mind. Oh, thinking a lot, wondering a lot. So in this way, you can improve your mindfulness, your practice. The thoughts can be less and less. If you do not note the thoughts immediately and carefully, you will not remove the thoughts quickly. That's why trying to note thinking or thoughts closely. When the last thought, the thought of lust rises, note it. It is so difficult. The Buddha already taught us. It is excitable, very delicate, not easy to control, not easy to restrain. Oh, it is true. When the thoughts rises, I could not note. I still do not know when my mind goes off. but you are very energetic, noting it closely, then you control. When you note it closely, you also would notice. When you note the thinking, the thought of lust, the last thought disappeared. Oh, now there is no last thought. The thought of lust in me, you will notice. That is, when you note it, you notice it disappear. It disappear. So with your mindfulness, you experience. So if you really notice, you might have confidence. You would have confidence. What the Buddha taught is true. Now when the thought of lust rises in my mind, I note it quickly. When I note it, it disappeared. No more lust thought. Last thought. Sometimes, while we are noting the rising, falling, other things, other objects, anger would arise. Anger would arise. When anger rises in your mind, what do? You have to note anger, anger, anger. Mostly, sometimes, if we could not note the rising, falling closely, we might get angry. If you are very eager to note the rising, falling closely, if you are unable to note it closely, you might be disappointed. Sometimes you might get angry. So note angry or anger. Sometimes you could not know the rising, falling because your mind goes away. You think about somebody to whom you don't like, so you get angry. Whenever you experience anger, your duty is noting. You must note anger, anger, anger. When you note anger closely, you might notice anger disappear. Anger disappear. So you notice now there is no anger in me. Sayadaw U Pannathami. The yogi knows the consciousness with anger or hate as consciousness with hate. So according to the translation I say, but according to our own experience, when there is anger in our mind, must be noted. When we know the anger closely, anger will disappear. Oh, there's no anger in my mind. So this is Vida Dosanwa Jaitan, Vida Dosanwa Jaitan Di Pajanadi. Sa Mohanwa Jaitan. Sometimes we do not know the rising, falling. We do not note any other objects in our body and mind. We just sit down, close the eyes. Sometimes we open our eyes, look at here and there, because our mind is so restless. We cannot be mindful. If so, we know nothing in our body and mind. The mind is so restless. So this is a moha. Moha is delusion. Delusion, we know nothing. Because we do not watch it carefully. We do not watch our body and mind carefully. Sa Vida Mohanwa Jaitan, Vida Mohanwa Jaitan Di Pajanadi. If you are careful, noting the rising, falling, you could notice the abdomen inflates, the abdomen deflates, expansion, contracting, releasing, upward movement, downward movement. So you know how the abdomen works. Oh, the motion, air element, you understand. This is the right understanding. No delusion in your mind, because you know in your body and mind movement when you note the rising, falling closely. So this is the instruction the Buddha gave us. We do not have the ability immediately just now I said, we are unenlightened ones. We live in the sensual pleasure world. We have to understand. Puthojana's minds are very crazy. Very crazy. That's why we tame the wise, tame the minds. Now you are the wise. So the wise tame their minds. How to tame your minds? With 4 foundations of mindfulness. So when we do something, we find something difficulties. We cannot achieve smoothly. We find difficult. When we practice meditation, we are working with our mind. We also find difficult. How difficult? Do you think, is it difficult to practice meditation? Yes. You want to gain something, what the Buddha taught, the purification of the mind, as the Buddha taught, you want to purify your mind, then as we are the followers of the Buddha, we want, what the Buddha taught, we want to attain enlightenment. Sotapaddi fruition, Skadagami fruition, Nagami fruition, the Arhat, if possible. But we cannot achieve immediately. We are unenlightened ones. Just now I said, we are living in the sensual pleasure world. We like the senses, craving for what? Visible objects. We like to see pleasant object, craving for sound, craving for smells, craving for taste, craving for touch. We also craving for thought. So difficult. That's why the Buddha taught hindrances. Hindrances are kamechanda, the sensual pleasure thoughts. More of them would arise while we practice meditation. Kamechanda, nivarana. So kamechanda, nivarana, the sensual pleasure hinders our mind. So when sensual pleasures, thoughts rises, we must note it closely. We may make something mistake, Citta Nupassana. When I talk about Citta Nupassana, now if you listen carefully, you would understand what the Citta Nupassana is. Citta Nupassana, when the lust or anger or delusion arises, must be noted, must be aware of it, not must follow it. We don't have to follow these kind of mind states. We must not follow. Because I tell you, some yogis, not here, some of my yogis, when they practiced under our instruction, we take care of them, then we interviewed them, then we correct them. But they do not practice with us all the time. They also go somewhere, they practice with other instructions. They met many teachers. So when they come back, they got some idea. Then they say, oh, I like to practice Citta Nupassana. Why do you like Citta Nupassana? Oh, it's very good to note Citta Nupassana. Let me know how it is good to practice Citta Nupassana. The Buddha taught the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Kaya Nupassana, Vedana Nupassana, Citta Nupassana, Dhamma Nupassana. So when I checked, they do not note closely, but they follow the thoughts. Following the thoughts, is it Citta Nupassana? What do you think? What do you think? Following the thoughts is not Citta Nupassana, what I understand. It's a thinking, imagination, fantasizing. Very good fantasizing sometimes. Have you experienced? Very good. Fantasizing. If you experience fantasize something, your mind won't come back to the main object. Take quite a long time, half an hour, 45 minutes, 55 minutes. The mind won't come back because you are fantasizing. Very difficult. Also very dangerous. Very dangerous. So we must note, the Buddha said, Sarakangwa Citta, Pachanati. Pachanati means you must know means you must note, you must be aware of it, you must observe it. Observe it means watch it. Watch it means note it closely. Mayama. Note it. When you note it, then you will notice it. What I say, you do it, you will know it. If you don't do it, you won't know it. Very simple instruction. So they say, I practice Citta Nupassana. So when I checked how did they practice, they didn't know what the thoughts arises. They just like to follow. I will tell you, one of the yogi in Burma, a gentleman, he practiced in our meditation center. My teacher is interviewed the male yogis. So he always explained how he experienced. Then he liked to sway his body. Then he smiled because I have to take care of the yogis at the time. Yogis. So when I reminded him to note it closely, carefully, then he stopped for a while. After a while, he swayed his body with smiling. Why he did like that? So I told Sayadaw, I have to report Sayadaw also how yogis practiced. Then Sayadaw also told him, reminded him, he didn't listen to Sayadaw. Later Sayadaw reminded him strictly, so he was so afraid. Then later he told me, he liked to sway his body. He liked to sway his body, also with imagination, he thought. So I saw when I was in Burma a yogi. Then another yogi, not in Burma. This yogi also practiced with me. When she practiced with me, she could practice ardently and energetically. Then she wanted to practice with other instructions. One day, she came to visit to me. I saw she looked not well. She said with her friend, she was under treatment. She take the medicines. I asked, why you take the medicine? Because she could not sleep. Now she stopped practice. I realized, I told her, you should not be worried. Personally, I told her, it is not necessary to take medicine, but when the doctor gives you, you have to take. But I thought you don't need to take medicine because you could not note when the thoughts arises. Your mind out of control. It's not true what you say. It's thinking with imagination. This kind of things you experienced. Then she realized. When I reminded her, she has confidence. Later, she didn't take medicine. Then later she told me she became normal. So, when the thoughts arises in the mind, we must note it closely. We must not follow. If we follow the thoughts, if we cannot note it, we can make something mistakes. I have met quite a number of yogis who practiced meditation with me before, but when something wrong, they are not my instruction. They practice other things. So have to be careful. Note the thoughts closely. Note the thoughts closely. At the Buddha's time, a bhikkhu whose name was Mikiya. At the time, he was the attendant of the Buddha. One day, he came back from the alms round. He saw a mango grove. It was so pleasant. He thought, if I practiced meditation in the mango grove, I would achieve something. He wanted to practice meditation in the mango grove very much. At that time, no monks around the Buddha. So when he asked permission from the Buddha told him, wait, another monks to come. So he didn't want to wait another monks until come. So he repeatedly requested the Buddha. So the Buddha told him, do what you like. So he went to the mango grove, practiced meditation at the foot of a tree. He could not be mindful. The whole day he practiced meditation. He could not get concentration. In the evening, he came back. So thought, a lot of imagination. So this is an example. There are also several examples. If we could not know the thoughts, we lost our mindfulness. So Citta Nupassana, when this kind of thoughts arises, we must note, mostly the sensual pleasure thoughts, note. Sensual pleasure thoughts, Kami Chanda Nivarana would arise in our mind. Then Vyapada, ill will, also would arise. When we practice meditation, anger would arise, disappointment would arise, sometimes depression would arise. When they arise, must be noted. The most difficult hindrance, Tina and Maida, sloth and torpor. We cannot avoid sloth and torpor when we practice meditation. We shall experience nodding our head, sleepiness. We shall experience. So when sloth and torpor arises, must be noted. When we are sleepy, note sleepy, note it. Why do we have sleepiness? If our noting mind is not strong enough, we may have sleepiness. Our energy, when our energy is weak, we may have sleepiness. So we have to check ourselves. My noting mind is strong enough or not? Do I note the rising, falling closely, other objects when they appear closely? We must check. When our effort is weak, note it carefully. Note it carefully. When the noting is strong enough, viriya is strong enough, we will have sleepiness immediately. So we have to check. Sometimes, not because we have lack of effort. We could note the rising, falling in other objects closely. Let's say you could note the rising, falling closely. When the rising, falling, if you could note the rising, falling closely, without thinking much, you also might have sleepiness. So when you report, you have to report clearly how you have sleepiness. If you say you could not know the rising, falling, when you have the sleepiness, you have to make effort, the mental effort. Then you could know the rising, falling closely. Then you have sleepiness, so your teacher will instruct you further. Note rising, falling, sitting, touching. Note rising, falling, sitting, touching. So if you add another two objects, you have to be alert. If you are not alert, you cannot know the four objects together. So in this way, you can make your mind alert. Noting rising, falling, sitting, touching, rising, falling, sitting, touching. You have to note in this way. But if you think you could not know the rising, falling, when the sleepiness arises, you have to be careful. Sometimes, because of the laziness, we may have sleepiness. But anyway, when you are sleepy, you have to note sleepy, sleepy, sleepy. If you are still sleepy, you can use. Now I will tell you. The first, you can change the object. You should change the object. Instead of noting rising, falling, just now I said add the object rising, falling, sitting, touching, or sitting, touching. In this way you will have sleepiness. Then if you are still sleepy, you can rub your face, or you just get up, then do practice walking meditation. Then sloth and torpor, then restlessness and remorse. If our noting mind cannot go to the object closely, we might have our mind become restless. Why do we have restless? Because our mind, noting mind, doesn't go to the object closely. That's why we have restless. But we must note restless. The better way to note the object closely. In this way, the mind becomes alert. The remorse. While we are noting the rising, falling, practicing meditation, when we have some quality of mindfulness, our mind becomes clear. When our mind becomes clear, we might remember in the past experiences. We have experienced good and bad, we might have done something wrong in the past. When we remember what we have something wrong in the past, regret would arise. Now at the moment, we trying to behave ourselves, we trying to purify our mind, so we have some quality of purification of mind. So at the same time, we also remember what we have done something wrong in the past. So guilty kind of feeling would arise. So this kind of feeling arises must be noted. Must be noted. The feeling of guilt, note it. So when we note it, we might notice it disappear. Then doubt would arise also sometime. When the doubt arises, note the doubt. Doubt about the Buddha, doubt about the teachings of the Buddha, doubt about the Sangha, doubt about the practice. Would it be possible to understand clearly as they really are? Just noting the rising, falling, sitting, touching, right step and left step, may experience this kind of doubt, but must note doubt. So these are the hindrances, always hinder our mind. We cannot achieve. That's why what I say, saying is very easy, practice is very difficult. Not easy. We are working with the mind. So note the rising, falling. The more you note the rising, falling closely, the more you would understand about your mind. So in this way, the thoughts become less and less. The Buddha taught us not easy to control the mind, not easy to restrain, but the wise trying to tame himself or herself. So if we are able to note it closely, when the thoughts arises, we can note it immediately. At the beginning of the practice, we do not have the ability to control it. Then practice respectfully. Not only the rising and falling, the feeling arises, other things arises, seeing, hearing, smelling. You practice very carefully. Slowly, you can control the mind. While you are noting the rising, falling, when the thought rises, you can catch it immediately. At the beginning of the practice, you do not have this kind of quality. Now you can catch it immediately. So just thinking about the sensual pleasure thought rises, then you catch it. Then you note it. When you note it, you notice it disappear. When anger arises, you catch it immediately. Then you note anger. When you note anger, anger disappeared. But it's not easy to remove anger or sensual pleasure thoughts immediately. Not easy. Anger is so strong. So we have to note for some time, note patiently. When anger, this is a strong feeling. We should not note just simply anger a few times, then come back. If we really want to know how anger arises and how anger disappears, we must note it closely. When we note the anger closely, we might notice anger getting stronger and stronger and stronger, we should not give up easily. Note it closely. So noting it continuously, eventually we might notice. While we are noting, a kind of thought also would arise. Why I'm getting angry? To whom I am angry? So in this way, when you note it closely, slowly anger disappeared. You would notice. So once you experience how anger disappear, you would have confidence. So following sittings, whenever the anger or other the mind state arises, you know how to manage with it. We yogis only want to note the pleasant feelings. Happy also very difficult. When happiness arises, because we like to accept, we forget to note happy. We must note it. When we note happiness, we notice happiness disappear. But mostly, yogis, they do not say, I note happy. When the happy rises, they just accept. I'm so happy. Oh, very pleasant feeling. I like it. But they don't say, I note it. I noticed. They don't say, I like it very much. They want to maintain happiness as long as they like. But they don't want to note the anger. They don't want to mention when the anger arises. They don't want to mention. They want to mention about the happiness. But must be noted both happiness and unhappiness. Unhappiness. So when you just what the Buddha taught, very difficult to see our mind. Very difficult to see. When we have strong mindfulness, we can see our mind. How do we see our mind? Have you ever experienced seeing your mind? You know the rising, falling closely. At the beginning of the practice, even though you practice for quite some time, you do not notice your mind. When your mind goes off, which part of your mind goes off, you do not notice. But when you practice according to the instruction of the Buddha, then slowly you could note the rising, falling closely. When the mind goes off, at the beginning you could not describe which part of the rising your mind goes off. Now your mindfulness is very good. Your energy is very strong, mental energy is very strong. So when I note the rising, falling, the middle of the rising, I noticed my mind goes off. So when I note it, suddenly my mind comes back to the rising and falling. I notice. So in this way, you have the ability to see your mind. That's why remember what the Buddha taught. Saragamwa Jaitan di Pachanati. I have to tell you again. When consciousness with the lust, the yogi knows there is consciousness with the lust in me. That is noting. Note it. When you note it, then you notice it. There is no consciousness with the lust in me. Very easy, according to our experience. When there is last thought, note the last thought straight away. Don't follow it. If you follow it, your mind won't come back to your main object. So this is a Caitanupasana, contemplation of consciousness. I will stop here for tonight. May you be well and happy. May you be able to practice meditation ardently and energetically. Then may you understand the dhamma clearly as they really are.